The What is Leadership Speaker Series. Hope you guys are all just as excited as I am here for Erin Kenny tonight. I'm Andy Westbury, one of the co-coordinators for the Speaker Series, along with my fellow senior Leah Hume. The Speaker Series is here to add to your toolbox of leadership skills. There's no one way to be a leader, but it's here to prompt reflection and thought regarding your leadership style. We all have different strengths, and leadership is about unlocking the potential within each of us. As a recreation outdoor education major, I'm continuously striving to be a better leader in my daily life, and not only because I know it'll lead to future opportunities for me, but because in today's global world we need synergy and innovative thinking to progress our ideas and push them forward. And that's only possible when we utilize our strengths in leadership. I hope this series this semester has brought you as much joy as it's brought me, and I hope that it unlocks some of the potential you have to the world. I want to thank some of our sponsors that allowed this event to happen tonight. Thank you to Everyone Guides, Lake School, Center for Environment and Sustainability, the School of Business, and the Recreation and Outdoor Education Department, along with a huge thanks to Brooke Moran, who's the backbone to this program and has made it such a success this semester. If you enjoyed the speaker so far, think about being a partner or member with our speaker series, and feel free to join our email list outside the auditorium. If you want to know who's coming up for the speakers in the fall, look at our www.western.edu/LSS, and you can talk to me, Leah, or Brooke. And now pass it over to Leah Hume to introduce Erin. Thank you.
So most of us are in this valley, at least partly, because we have a connection to the outdoors, whether it's hunting, fishing, swimming, hiking, mountain biking, or a variety of other pursuits. We've created a connection to the Gunnison Valley area and more than likely other areas around the world. Tonight, Erin Kenny will be gracing the stage to tell us her personal story about leadership within our natural environment. She's an amazing woman who started out as an environmental lawyer and transitioned into creating a forest kindergarten school. She dedicates each day to guiding her students and teaching them based on their interests and curiosities. Not only has she created this unique school, but she has also created a teacher program so that others can follow in her footsteps. She's featured on Nightline, Sierra Club Magazine, NPR, and many other forms of national media. She's a woman who follows her passion while fulfilling a societal need. Now, if you know who I am, you'll know that I'm very passionate about working with kids, particularly in the environment. And I first learned of her work at the beginning of this semester, and I knew that she would touch the people in this valley. She works every day to create an emotional connection between her students and the forest kindergarten environment. She's a role model for me, and I hope someday to take her teacher program and start a forest kindergarten school in Colorado. She'll also be having her books for sale on the table outside, so feel free to stop by and check them out. Whether it's educational ideas, messages about compassion or passion, lessons on leadership, or any other topics, I'm confident that we'll all walk away with something valuable tonight. Please give a warm welcome to Erin.
Thank you so much, Leah. I'm so happy to be here, and I was really thrilled when Leah contacted me. But truthfully, the first thought I had was, I'm a leader. I didn't even really understand what I was going to talk about. I just am there working the forest kindergarten and connecting children with nature every single day on a very small island in Puget Sound. And the work that I'm doing there has started to ripple outward throughout not only the Seattle area, but nationally and internationally as well. I've studied the forest kindergartens in Germany, the Netherlands, Scotland, and last year I was invited to speak at the International Forest Kindergarten Conference in South Korea. A lot of people don't even know that there are forest kindergartens, and so that's one of the things I'm here to talk to you about. I'm also here to talk to you about how I ended up being in a leadership role when I wasn't really preparing for that. I was just following my passion. So I decided to call this talk Communicating Your Passion, because I think that's one of the most important things you can do as a leader, is inspire others and educate them, rather than trying to convert them or act like you have the best idea and just kind of forcing it on others. So just wanted to start off with, I was pretty much born into a leadership role. I'm the oldest of 7 kids who were born a year apart. So my childhood household was crazy. And my parents quickly put me in a leadership position. I heard throughout my life, you're to set an example for the younger kids. And actually, I didn't really like being in that position because I felt like it put me under the lens for as far as my parents, and I had to uphold a higher level of responsibility than my other brothers and sisters. So I wasn't really that fond of being in that role. And also, I couldn't make my brothers and sisters do what I wanted them to do. And I was supposed to be the leader. I was supposed to be the top of the heap. And I realized pretty quickly that it's hard to force people to do what you want to do. And so early on, I had some insight about what it takes to be a leader. So that's just a little bit about how I started out being a leader. Of course, when I was a kid, the main adjective used to describe me was bossy. And that is just because of the type of leadership I was attempting, was to force my brothers and sisters to do what I wanted them to do. The other adjective that came to mind a lot of times was domineering. So really this kind of attempt to top down, control the rest of the group. I'm the leader, you are going to follow me whether you like it or not. So that was my first experience with leadership, and it didn't go very well. I really didn't excel in that, and it was very, very frustrating to me as a child to be in that position. I had an interesting pathway to the work that I'm doing now, and I just also wanted to share that I didn't really figure out what I was going to do with my life until my early 40s. So you have lots of time. You don't have to feel like I have to know what I gotta do, you know? I think it's really important to tap into what you're passionate about, what really inspires you, and sort of follow that path rather than forcing a path to be in front of you. So after I graduated from college, I went to the Evergreen State College in Olympia, Washington, and I graduated from there with a BA in environmental education. And I knew early on that I was a naturalist. I have a strong need to be outdoors. And I also knew that I had a strong connection with children. I'm one of those kid magnets. Kids just always want to be around me. And I was one of those adults that whenever I went to parties, I would be outside playing with the kids rather than inside talking with the other adults. And some people thought that was a dysfunctional part of my personality, but I happen to think that's just one of the charms. So anyway, early on, as I said, I knew that there was something about this connection to nature and my need to be in nature, and also my unique connection to children in a way that was more playful than trying to be bossy over my brothers and sisters. So after I got out of college, I moved to Seattle because there weren't really any jobs in Olympia. And after a couple of years not really knowing what to do, sort of floating around, I decided that I would go to law school. And the main reason I did that is because of my strong desire to protect the environment. I wanted to get into environmental law so that I could work for a nonprofit organization like the Sierra Club or National Wildlife Federation and be a really good lawyer for a nonprofit that maybe couldn't afford a lot of really good lawyers. And that would be my way to give back, and that would be my way to help protect the nature that I love so much. As I was going through law school, I simultaneously got a job as a summer caretaker at a wilderness hot springs. It's a fabulous piece of land in an ancient forest, an area in the Cascade Mountains that has never ever been logged. And so I had a really great and unique opportunity to spend quality time in a very, very intact wilderness setting. And I took that opportunity to teach myself all about the edible and medicinal uses of the plants. So As I moved along that path, I started getting more and more interested in teaching others about the plants, about the ecosystem, and getting less interested in the law school thing. After I got out of law school, I did a couple of years as a lawyer and realized that the problem for me was that I would be spending all my time indoors and in a law library or an office or a courtroom. That wasn't going to serve me. And the other thing was I just didn't feel like I wanted to fight for something. I don't like being adversarial, and law by nature is adversarial. So even though I had what I thought was my motive was great, and I had a high intention to protect the environment, I realized that it didn't resonate with me and who I was. I couldn't fight all the time for the environment. So I decided to approach it from a different angle. I started thinking more about education. I started thinking about how people connect with nature. What makes people want to protect the environment? What makes them care about whether a forest is going to be logged? And that comes from a personal connection with nature. When you go out into nature and you find that special place, it's horrifying to then find that it's scheduled to be clear-cut. So I started having this idea about forming this organization that I would take people out into the forest, connect them with these ancient forests in the Cascades, and then they would be interested in preserving them. So I started a nonprofit called the Ancient Forest Education Foundation. And the motto for that was preservation through education. So I was starting to see the link between education and conservation work. Well, I was also in a band, a rock band, for several years during this time. I was also doing macro photography of the wildflowers at the hot springs. I was sort of dabbling in a whole bunch of different things and just seeing where my inspiration was going to come from and where my passion was going to lie. I enjoyed doing all of those things. And later on, when I started the forest kindergarten, I thought back to all of the things I had done after law school and before forming the school, and wondering how they fit in. And I started realizing that everything I had done up until that point really did serve the work I was doing now, even though at the time I couldn't have known that. At the time, they were just individual passions that I was pursuing, the photography and ethnobotany, which is knowing the edible and medicinal uses of the plants, being in a rock band, creating music, and those kinds of things were all really fun for me. I guess one of the things that I think about when you think about being a leader is you should enjoy what you're doing. I mean, it should be fun for you. If it's not fun, then you're not really inspiring other people because you're just going to be trying to force it on them like I was when I was a kid. So I actually started setting up these nature walks for various groups and taking them out to these ancient forests and teaching them. But there was a lot of logistics about that, and then I got pregnant. My son is now 11, and I had him when I was 43. So it completely changed my life at that point. And I still hadn't really known what I was going to do. At this point, I had moved to Vashon Island, which is a small island in Puget Sound outside of Seattle. And I had created homeschool programming for the homeschool community on our island. We have a strong homeschool community on Vashon. And I said, I will teach these kids, but I am taking them outside for the entire class. Not just part of the class, but the entire class is going to be outside. And the classes were in forest ecology and becoming a naturalist and that kind of topic. I just felt strongly that you cannot teach about nature in a classroom. And that just kept coming back to me. You can't connect people with nature and have them learn to love nature by studying it in a classroom. You have to bring people outside and connect them with nature in that way. So I had all of these outdoor classes, and I'm still in touch with some of those kids now. It's been 15 years, and some of those, they were then young high school students. Now they've gone on to graduate school, and a lot of them are in the environmental field. And they have contacted me and said that these all outdoor classes were really inspirational to them and affected what they did with their lives. And that couldn't have been more gratifying to me, because that was my hope and dream. Well, after I had my son, when I was looking for a preschool for him, I was really dismayed that all of the preschools, even on our small rural island, were completely indoors. And they'd only go out if it was nice weather. Now in the Northwest, it rains about 10 months of the year. So if you're not going out when it's raining, you're really not getting the kids out much. So I had this idea about this all outdoor preschool, just like I had been doing those all outdoor classes for the homeschool, high school kids. So I started thinking about what would that be like, all outdoor preschool, that we never went inside, the classes were completely outdoors. And it sort of fit into all of the things that I was passionate about, connecting with nature, working with children, and then linking those together, connecting children with nature, which would then lead to environmental leaders, which we badly need at this point in time. So I took this leap of faith, and I would have to say that leadership definitely requires a leap of faith, because a lot of times to be a leader, you're tapping into a place that no one has gone before. So in this country, there were no forest kindergartens, and I'll describe what a forest kindergarten is in a minute. There were no forest kindergartens. There were no schools that were operating completely outdoors for the entire time that the children were there. And I had to just let it out to fate and say, this is what I intend to do, this is what I want to do, this is what I think is the highest use of my talent and my time. And I just put up some posters on our island announcing this outdoor school for preschoolers and crossed my fingers. And soon enough, people actually came and enrolled their children in this school. So that's just kind of a little bit about how I got to where I am. And as you can see, it's not something I could plot out. I didn't go to school to do what I'm doing now. So I think one of the things I would also want to share is that you don't have to know exactly what you're going to do with your life right now. I think that what's important is to find what you're passionate about and to draw from that strength, and everything will fall into place. That I'm confident of. So I wanted to just mention about this forest kindergarten model, because a lot of people in this country still don't know what it is. Forest kindergarten is drawn from the German early childhood education model called a Wald kindergarten. Wald means forest, kindergarten means child's garden. The word kindergarten was coined by Frederick Froebel over 100 years ago, and it has nothing to do with the way we use the word kindergarten now. In fact, most countries around the world, the word kindergarten actually refers to the preschool years. So we're one of the only countries that uses kindergarten to designate the first year kids are in public school. So kindergarten, a child's garden, was an early childhood education model that was meant to have the children be outdoors all the time, because the man who developed this concept strongly believed that young children need to be in nature to develop their whole being, physical, emotional, and mental sides. So the other part of the forest kindergarten, besides being all outdoors all the time, is that it is completely interest-led. So the teacher has no agenda, no lesson plan, no schedule, no structure for the kids. Kids just come to the school, and we have them for 3, 4, or 5 hours, depending on what the parents have signed them up for. And during that entire time, they can do whatever they want to interact with nature, with certain guiding principles, like respect for living beings and that kind of thing. But there's no, schedule overlaid on the children. And the beauty of this is that those kids end up being leaders, so it's interest-led. And the children are leading us through the day. And there are many ways that we develop and support these kids in this leadership role. But that whole idea of interest-led, it's also called flow learning, that is very little known in this country. And most American educators feel like that's a recipe for disaster. Like, you let a whole bunch of kids outdoors without any schedule or structure, and they're just going to be running all over and going crazy. And that's actually not what we see. That there may be some running now and then, but most of the time the kids are so interested in nature. And I'm working with 2 to 6-year-olds, all in the same class. They're so excited about nature, they just can't wait to get muddy, dig in the dirt, climb, hide, build secret forts, all of the things that I actually did when I was a kid, that kids don't get an opportunity to do anymore. So being born in 1960 and all through the 60s and 70s, kids, the natural way that kids were raised was hours and hours of outdoor time, completely unsupervised, and no adults knew where we were or how high we were climbing the trees. And now people are getting arrested for that kind of parenting. It's hard for me to understand because I lived that childhood and my parents were not negligent. They didn't deserve to be arrested, and yet that's what's ending up happening now. And it's really perplexing to me how we got this far. The other component of this program is that since it is all interest-led, child-driven, we try not to give any answers. So it's all inquiry-based teaching style. So in the minute the kids see something that they're interested in, we'll ask leading questions about, what do you think that is? And why is that different than we saw yesterday? What do you think nibbled on that? What else could it have been? All these leading questions that sort of elicit a conversation with the children. One of the benefits of this kind of program is that today's children get almost no downtime. They're basically in transition continuously. So they are allowed maybe 30 minutes at the playground, and then they have to hurry up and go here, and then it's rush to get there, and then hurry up and get shoes on, we gotta go somewhere else now. They're in a continual state of transition. And the nature of preschoolers is that time just expands outward for them in a way that it doesn't in today's world of adults. So this sense of timelessness in nature, 3, 4, 5 hours, where nobody's telling you what to do, that is something that today's kids are not getting, that I actually took for granted. And I can identify certain benefits to that to myself as far as my mental health. Having a place in nature to go when I was feeling upset or out of sorts was really important. I had a favorite beech tree that I would climb up and sit in the limbs of that tree, and I would feel whole and at peace again. And children today just don't have this opportunity. For one thing, they're forbidden to climb. A lot of kids today, they're not even allowed to climb. A lot of school districts have forbidden the kids to pick up sticks or rocks. They're not allowed to do any digging. They're definitely not allowed to take off their shoes, which at our school, the kids can go barefoot if they want. So one of the things when I thought about leadership too is, mainly I was describing the forest kindergarten because I wanted you to know why I am doing what I do. I mean, I am here, not particularly here today, but in my life to inspire others to seek, maybe to attempt, take that leap of faith and do something different to connect today's children with nature because they're not getting enough of it. Part of being a good leader, I think, too, is revealing your own vulnerabilities. I think too often leaders want to stand up and say, they seem really detached and aloof, and they're perfect, and they're not affected by anything. And nobody wants to hear about leadership from a hard ass. And I think that part of, for me, what is an effective leader is someone who is willing to be vulnerable and share their circumstances, because we're not perfect. Nobody is. And a lot of people who are in leadership roles think that they have to maintain this hard shell in order to convince people that they are the boss. What I think is more important is revealing, as I said, your vulnerabilities, your insecurities. I'm very sad. The last few days, I just want to share with you, my cat suddenly and inexplicably died 4 days ago. And it was really difficult and challenging to think about them coming here and speaking and not breaking down. And one of the reasons I wanted to share that with you is because it gave me an opportunity to see my 11-year-old move into a little bit of a leadership role. As when we found the cat dead and we were both crying really hard, and at one point his crying slowly slowed a little. He put his hand on my shoulder and he said, "Deep breaths, Mom, deep breaths." And I was just so struck by that. You know, I felt like I have given him space and allowed him to know that he could step into that role when needed. He has the tools that he can support me, an adult, because I haven't just been the kind of parent, because as a parent you are the leader. You're put in that role just by default. And so it was nice to see that he didn't see me as someone who was infallible or had such a hard shell that I didn't at some point need to be comforted by my 11-year-old. It was really beautiful to see that. So we all have stuff going on all the time, and it's just really important to remember when we're connecting with each other that we all have stuff going on that we might not even know about, and that everyone has that place inside them that is a soft spot, and that leads to connection. And I think that that's also what I wanted to say about true leadership is about connection. It's not about someone being at the top and everybody else below. It's about a leader bringing out what's inside of them as part of their passions and empowering others to bring that out inside their self. And realizing that there's a point of connection where we see each other as in our authentic selves, our most vulnerable states, and being able to touch each other in that way, knowing that we're all just going through life. We make missteps and we falter, and that's okay. So I did mention that these preschool kids are leaders, which is really neat to see. There's a famous saying that some people are born leaders, and some people achieve leadership, and some people are thrown into leadership. And I think that there's another way. I think there is cultivating leadership. And that's something that we do at Forest Kindergarten all the time. So if you work with preschoolers or you're around preschoolers at all, you know that they all want to be the leader. When we're heading out on the trail in the forest, they all want to be the leader. I'm the leader. I'm the leader. No, I'm the leader. And they're fighting over who's going to be the leader. So then I say, okay, well, we're just going to take turns being leader because that's what's fair. And so, Mickey, you can be the leader first. So we get on the trail, and we're in a line, and Mickey runs as fast as he can all the way down to the end of the trail. And I was saying, okay, well, let's talk about this leader thing. Because it's not about being first. That's, in their mind, leadership is all about being first. Who's going to be the first to see it. They even get in arguments over who was the first one to make a nature discovery. So they'll see a slug, and they'll get all excited, and they'll point out the slug, and another kid will say, oh, I saw that slug first. So it's a really strong need for them to be first and to be leaders. And pulling those two things apart is really important. So I identified that mostly when they're talking about being the leader, they just want to be first. So I talked to Mickey about the responsibility of being a leader. That being a leader means being responsible for your group. As a leader, you can't run off and leave your group in the dust. You are responsible for the group, making sure everybody's okay, nobody's left behind, and all those different aspects of being a leader. The other thing that is really neat to see in our program, because they're 2 to 6 year olds, is that we can put the 6-year-olds, the 5 and 6-year-olds, in leadership positions over the 2 and 3 year olds. And I'm very careful, because of my childhood, I'm very careful not to just put them in that leadership position and then have them dictate what the younger kids are going to do. That's not what being a leader is, and I discovered that on my own. So I talked to these older kids about how now you are a teacher. You see these younger kids? They don't know the things you do. So you are their teacher. And they get excited about that, being in that role, and feeling like they have value in how they can teach and nurture these younger children. And it is so beautiful to then see these 5- and 6-year-olds gently tending to these 2- and 3-year-olds and taking them by the hand and showing them different things and encouraging them to be gentle with how we hold all the wildlife, the slugs and millipedes that we do pick up. So having a model where children are learning that leadership is not about being the boss or about being first. It's about a responsibility towards the group, and it's also about being tender, nurturing, and sharing with the younger people, or, in case of older leader and younger people, being able to share leadership is very, very important, and that's something that these kids are learning. The other thing is, their need to be first is so great that one of the things we have instituted on the trail when they're running up the trail is that if somebody behind them is running faster and they say, "Excuse me," the person in front is to step aside so the other person can pass them. Well, you'll have kids running up the trail, and a child will be 5 feet behind the other child saying, "Excuse me, excuse me," and the other child 5 feet in front of them is not moving, and then this child gets upset and comes to me, "So-and-so didn't move off the trail," and I said, "Excuse me." I said, "Well, that's because they were running faster than you, and they were ahead of you, and that's okay." So the other interesting thing is I do have an opportunity often to see the bossy child, the child that I was in the forest kindergarten setting. And those are the kids who are almost always, have to be first. They have to be identified as the first one to have made a nature discovery. They're always trying to push their agenda or their ideas on the other kids. Again, trying to force people to follow them as the leader. And I saw that doesn't work. So I identify these children who would previously be called bossy. And when I have the parent-teacher conference with their parents, I talk about this quality as a leadership quality. And I tell the parents, one of the things that I'm doing with their children is creating a benevolent leader. That's the leadership that I would like to see, is kind, nurturing, and patient with people who don't know as much as you do. And so tending to these children who are showing these nascent leadership qualities, but are still hooked on that being the boss idea of leadership. And showing them another way, showing them how to be nurturing and patient with the younger kids, bringing out these leadership qualities and developing the benevolent leader. So I also started a summer nature immersion program for older kids, and this has actually been ongoing for 15 years. When I first moved to Vashon, I bought 5 acres of native forest land, and that land was where I was running the all-outdoor homeschool program. Well, I also, that very first year I owned land, started a summer nature camp that was all outdoors. All 4 days was all outdoors. And I started out by having it run as an environmental education class, because as a living in a culture where we are really requiring measurable learning by all of the kids, even preschool kids these days, I felt like I had a responsibility to the parents to show that their kids were learning at my environmental education camp. And so I had a whole bunch of projects for the kids to do, making nature journals, collecting plants, doing herbal medicine making. And they liked it pretty much, except it felt a lot like school. It felt like, here they're out in nature and they're having to do all these projects and there's all this scheduling. So as the years went by, I let go of more and more of the activities and the scheduling and projects. And the kids started reporting back to me that my summer camp was their favorite because there was no schedule. There was no, you have to do this now or you won't be able to do it. So they started to enjoy what I took for granted in my childhood. I thought that childhood was defined by long hours out in nature with nothing to do except explore nature and be in nature and all the ways that kids love to be in nature. So these summer camps, the kids started being really sad that they were aging out of these camps. And they wanted to know how they could connect back in with the program. And I started having this idea about hiring them or having them, they actually volunteer, come back and be mentors. So these kids who've gone through the summer camps year after year after year, then they're moved into a leadership role. And they come back as mentors and leaders for the summer camps with the younger kids. And the way that I identify who I'm going to choose to be in that mentor role has a lot to do with what I've observed these kids and their interactions with the younger kids at the summer camps. So I'm looking specifically for the benevolent leader, the kind, thoughtful, patient leader, the older kid who is excited and shows excitement when a young child makes a discovery. I remember just recently, my own 11-year-old son was up visiting the forest kindergarten, and there was a 4-year-old boy there. And my kid is a kid magnet too, so all the little kids are always clamoring over him. So one of the 4-year-old boys said, "Hey, Shanakai, I got you a rain jacket." And I knew that some 11-year-olds would just be like, "Yeah, okay, cool, whatever." But my son, I was so proud, he said, "Wow, that's really cool." And he modeled and reflected back to that kid his own excitement. And that's something that we also are tapping into as leaders of these children, is that no matter how many times that I've seen a banana slug, when these kids, these 3- and 4-year-olds, are so truly excited over a nature discovery, we reflect back to them this awe and wonder and excitement, no matter how many times we've seen that nature object. Because in today's world, so many kids don't see adults get excited about nature. If they've seen one bug, they've seen them all, and they really don't care. So children are not getting an opportunity to see adults they respect or adults in their lives get excited about just little aspects of nature the way a child does. When children are making new discoveries, it's really important to support that because they're not as tainted as we are, in a sense of just and jaded about, yeah, we've seen all that. So the most effective teacher is the one that can genuinely have that excitement all over again for those nature discoveries that those children are finding. I have a couple of slides I wanted to show you, just to show a little bit more about what I do. But before I did, I wanted to mention that in speaking about leadership, I was struck by the fact that, and there was actually just an NPR show about this, that in nature, there are no hierarchies. So the leadership model that we see quite often in humans is not natural. That if you look in nature, that most natural systems have a more holistic idea of leadership. So if you think of a flock of geese, and we all know about how the Canada geese, when they fly in that V formation, they fly for thousands and thousands of miles. The leader of that, the one in the prime position of the V, drops back every now and then, and a new leader emerges. And then at some point in time, and who knows how they decide, one of the front goose, again, will move to the back, and a new one will move into the leadership position. So it's a continual exchange and handoff of the leadership position. And it makes the flock more dynamic to have a new leader, new ideas, a new change of direction, maybe. And that's just a model that seems more natural, that seems really to go against the flow, to have this idea of leadership being one person on top and everybody else down below. True leadership is meant to be shared. And good leaders do not micromanage the people that are following them. You know, I didn't consider myself a leader, even though I call myself a leader in the forest kindergarten movement, but I haven't seen myself in that way. And it's really been a wonderful opportunity for me to reflect on that role and how I came to it and what it takes to be a good leader. And also, since I am so connected to nature, it really felt good to look to nature at what makes good leadership. One more quick thing. There's a lot of concern these days in environmental circles about who are going to be the next environmental leaders. Today's kids are having such a lack of outdoor time, a lack of connection to nature. And one of the things that's been found out is that when they've interviewed environmental leaders, they have found two most important things that affected them and led them into wanting to protect the environment. One was having extended outdoor time as a child, a connection to nature. And the second was having a mentor who taught them to respect nature. So that's another important piece of what we're doing with these kids. These are not the kids who will be going through nature, crushing bugs, whipping the heads off flowers. We are teaching them how to respect nature, that all of nature is alive, and we are part of that. We have lots of lessons in gratitude and respect for nature. And those are, again, what feed into this idea of a benevolent leader, that you can be a leader and have a soft side, too. So these are some of the kids at the forest kindergarten. This girl is 2 years old, and she's making some little concoction. And the other girl is watching. They're both 2-year-olds, and they're making some kind of cake or imagination delight. Now, again, since it's all interest-led, the kids are just able to do whatever they want. And the funny thing is, in the fall, when they show up, they don't really know how to play in nature so much without adult direction, because that really hasn't been part of what they've been exposed to yet. So these kids are here 3, 4, 5 hours with no direction. You can instantly see in the fall the kids who were there the year before, because they just come into our forest and they have ideas and they know how to implement them. And they become role models for the newer kids who are coming in, who don't really know how to play without direction, and they get all kinds of ideas from these other kids. Now these kids are about the same age, but the girl with the bucket came, she was already at our school for a year, and the other girl just came. So she's teaching her one of the ways to play in the forest without any direction. A lot of times, I was saying that a lot of times people think that when we're out there with the kids that they're just all running around like crazy, and quite often the kids just lie on the ground. They just lie on the ground. And one of the ways that I'm a leader out there as well, even though it is all about the kids and they're leading the day, there are ways that I can subtly lead them. One of the things that I'll do sometimes is I will just lay down on the ground. When I don't, when I'm just feeling I want to lay on the ground, or I'm looking around and there's nothing that's inspiring me, I will just find a place and I will just lay on the ground. And then the kids will come running over and go, "What are you doing?" "Oh, I'm just laying on the ground looking at the trees." "Can I lie down with you?" "Sure. Come on, let's lie down." So there's another example of leadership that's not like, come on, you're going to follow me now. You're interesting enough that the kids want to find out what's going on. In fact, when I first was having the idea about the forest kindergarten, I was working at a preschool on Vashon, and the woman had hired me to be their science teacher and to get the kids out every day, no matter what the weather, for at least 30 to 45 minutes. And when I first started taking the kids outside, they would all just run right over to the playground. Slides, swings. Teacher, can you push me on the swing? And that's what they were hooked on. So what I started doing was going over to a corner of the yard where there was grass, and I just got down and I just started looking intently at something. I think it was nettles or dandelion or something, looking at it intently. And that's all I had to do. That was leadership. And all the kids immediately come flocking over to me. What are you looking at? What are you looking at? It's like, oh, look at this. It's a nettle. I was just looking at this nettle. It looks so good. I think I want to eat one of those leaves. And then they were fascinated because they didn't know that I know how to eat nettles raw. So anyway, I started teaching them in the moment. It's like as the interest was there, I would capture that and make that a learning moment. So it wasn't top-down learning. It was like all of a sudden the kids were there and they were interested, and I could give them as much of a lesson as their attention could stay focused on, and then the minute they weren't interested in, that was it. I didn't continue to say, oh wait, I wasn't done telling you about these plants. So as time went on, pretty soon actually, whenever the kids went outside, they didn't go to the swings or the slide. They went immediately over to the corner of the yard where the plants were. And they couldn't wait to see what new things would be there and what nature finds we would discover. So one of the ways that I lead children is in just being my authentic self and doing what I want to do in nature, whether it's intently looking at some nature find or just laying down on the ground. They don't see many adults lie down on the ground. I've actually had kids ask me if I am an adult because I go barefoot all the time and I lay on the ground, and they're not used to seeing adults like that. So this is, when my hair was long, obviously. This was just in the fall, and these kids, they were pretending they were riding a train. And so a lot of times I will join in with them, but part of what makes a good leader too is knowing when to step back, knowing when to step out, and being able to let go of that leadership role. Because the children, it's all about the children. So I may be there with them and joining in for part of the play, then at a certain point I will remove myself and let the children really take off and lead what's going to happen next. This is the forest where the school is run. The children love to face paint with mud. That's mud. And they teach each other about all the different kinds of mud. We have about 15 different kinds of mud there. I have no idea. This is what the children are teaching me. And every different kind of mud has a different use. Some are good for building, some are for face painting, and then they have different textural feels. We got silky mud, gooey mud, sticky mud, spotty mud, just to name a few. And the kids will excitedly show up every day and go, oh, what kind of mud? Oh, there's some silky mud. Silky mud we know is where we're going to see animal footprints, because it's the mud that gets that sheen on the top of it. It's very, very smooth, and the animal footprints are really noticeable in that. Spotty mud is when it's been raining really hard, big raindrops, and it makes these craters, little craters in the mud. And so the children quickly discover which mud is the best for face painting, and that's what they love to do. The other thing is, engaging in play with the children too. Sometimes they'll ask, do you want to have your face painted? And I may or may not. And that day, sometimes I will get a mud face paint, and then I actually will forget because it dries on your face. I'll forget, and I'll go into town, go to the bank or the grocery store or something. And we live in a really small town, and people are out in nature a lot. Nobody even says anything. Like, they don't even tell me you're going to have mud on your face. But the other thing about being a good leader, too, is being able to set your own boundaries. So we lead by example, too. We have a lot of rules in the forest kindergarten to keep the kids safe, keep them respecting nature. So, for example, we ask the kids to always check in and ask first before they touch anyone. So if they're going to go and give another kid a hug, we say, oh, ask before you hug. And part of that is because we're teaching even these young children that they have a right to their own body and their own body space, and that nobody can touch them in a way that makes them feel uncomfortable. Most of the times the kids say, yeah, I'll take a hug. So we, as teachers, we try to model that. I'm a very huggy person. A lot of times I'll just step in to hug people. And we started with the teachers. We started not giving the kids mixed messages. Say, oh, Teacher Ginger, is it okay if I hug you right now? Yes, I would love a hug. Okay, great. Also, as far as boundaries and body space, a lot of times preschoolers want to climb into your lap or lean against you, and I see teachers being very, increasingly uncomfortable. Two kids are leaning in on them, and they don't say anything. And I say something, because you are modeling what you're expecting of the kids. And so you have to be clear about your boundaries too. You're crowding me. I don't really want you pushing against me right now. And that's okay. Modeling the language we expect from the kids, the kindness, the respect, and the checking in first is all an important part of the way that we are leaders for these children, teaching and leading by example. This is a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, and 5-year-old's been there a couple of years at our school, and the 2-year-old just started this year. So these older kids are teaching the younger kids how to be gentle, because not all kids show up at our school and are able to not crush the bugs or squeeze the slugs. They have no idea. And so these older kids are very good. So we don't have to always be stepping in as the leaders, as the teachers. We rely on these younger kids, and we encourage them and empower them to voice what they learned in the school. And so they're very good about showing the younger kids how to carefully hold these small creatures. And you see she's got her face painted too. Stroking gently. I mean, there are things that we let the kids hold, and there are things we discourage them from holding. Tiny little insects that they could easily crush, amphibians that they could easily contaminate their skin. The children would contaminate the frogs' skin because their skin is so permeable, and we're always putting on, people use antibacterial soap and lotions and bug spray and all of that. It's totally poison to amphibians if you handle them with that on. People quite often ask me what I do with the children when it's raining, and I think that's a really funny question, because that rain never discouraged kids from playing. It's the adults who discourage them from playing out in the rain. As long as they're appropriately dressed, and we work diligently with that. We have pursued sponsorships with Bob's Foods, Columbia Sportswear, and Oki Wear that these kids are wearing, and making sure that the kids are always warm and dry when they're all outdoors. Because what we're trying to do is positively connect children with nature. And if they are uncomfortable or wet or cold and they're not having a good time, they're not going to associate that with the fact that their clothing is not that good. They're going to associate that with being in nature. And they're going to think that being in nature is cold and uncomfortable. So it's one of the linchpins of our whole program, is making sure the kids are appropriately dressed. And our school has taken a leadership role in that aspect too, because we were the first ones approaching, as Forest Kindergarten, approaching these companies for sponsorships. And now when teachers come and train with me, I encourage them to just reach out to these companies, because they have a vested interest in people passing along the information about how great their clothes are, and that we're nurturing the next generation of environmental leaders, kids who care about the environment, and that's only going to happen if they love being outdoors and they know how to be appropriately dressed. We do a lot of imagination with the kids. This boy is reading a salal leaf book. We have a plant called a salal that's a evergreen plant with big, broad leaves. And a lot of times when we're doing storytelling, we'll just storytell at the top of our heads. Because it's interest-led, we tell the children, oh, what stories do you have? Does anybody want to tell a story? And they might say, oh, I don't really have any stories. I say, well, tell us what you did this morning. That's a story. Tell us what you're doing in your life. And then at one point, the idea of books came up. And so I just grabbed some of these leaves and put them together and took a little twig and put it in as a binding. And then the kids would read from this salal leaf book. And it was so neat because they'd be turning the pages and making up their story, and then the other kid would get so inspired, they would say, hey, I want to read from the book. And they'd tell a completely different story using the same salal leaf book. So these kids are all also teaching each other. Like, that's another thing I see all the time, is one kid will have an idea, and the other kids think that's really neat. And those kids are really open to sharing their ideas, and that's something we're also cultivating. Teamwork and cooperation are really obvious in the outdoor setting. You see very little competition amongst these kids, and if they do bring competition, then we work with that, we talk about that, because we live in a very competitive world. And yet being in nature really brings out this sense of cooperation and teamwork, and we work to really encourage that. This is their sharing this love, being really gentle. This is the other thing. We allow the kids to have their own experience of nature. This girl does not feel cold, obviously, on her hands. And when the kids want to explore snow like this, we don't say to them, you can't do that. You need to put mittens on. If there's danger of frostbite, we'll do that because we take it very seriously, the work we're doing, and we can identify what is risky, minimal risk, and what is hazardous to the children. We do have problems with hypothermia in the Northwest, which you might have here too. So you have to really find a balance with what you're going to allow the children to do, and when you do have to say, no, actually you really do need to put on your mittens. And that's another time when teaching by example comes up, because I have some weird sensory issues with my hands. I cannot wear gloves or mittens. I just rip them off within a few minutes. And then we're telling the kids, no, it's so cold today, you must wear your mittens. But then we don't want them to see the teachers not wearing the mittens. So what we're requiring of the kids, we also need to model that as well and show them that we are willing to stick to the rules that we have instituted. This is, me eating snow. So one of the big things that comes up is this whole idea of awe and wonder. And that, as I was saying before, so many adults these days are so jaded and don't have this sense of excitement about nature. And this is one of the most important qualities of a forest kindergarten teacher, or really most preschool teachers, I think, but especially in the outdoor setting, recreating that sense of awe and wonder and really feeling it authentically, because kids know when you're faking it. If you work with preschoolers, you know. And so I love this picture because all the kids are doing, I am reacting to something that the one girl's showing me, the other boy has binoculars, he's looking at a fir branch that the other girl has, and it's just really rich in sensory exploration. A lot of times, as I said, we're leading by modeling, so a kid will make an interesting discovery, and then I'll say, oh, what does it smell like? I wonder what it smells like. You know, we found some sap on the tree, we found a mushroom. What does that smell like? What does it feel like? Is it cold? Is it soft? Like that, encouraging children to open up all their senses and also be able to describe what it is they're experiencing. Once children have an idea, and sometimes another thing I'll do is besides spontaneously laying on the ground or intensely looking at something, is all just make some nature art. So on this day, I had just taken a maple leaf and stuck a stick through it and put it in the ground. Like, it looked really cool. And the kids thought it was really neat, and they started just sitting around in a circle. So it wasn't me, okay kids, now we're gonna do this, and I'm gonna lead you through this art activity. Once they saw my prototype, then they themselves went and grabbed leaves and sticks, and they had this whole conversation about if they were going to do what I did, or if they were going to do something else. They also collected some ferns they were going to add to their nature art. So this high level of creativity is stimulated by the outdoor environment and also by the method of teaching. One of the things that we discovered, I could not have actually anticipated this benefit. As I was saying before, today's kids really don't have an opportunity to be out in nature for extended periods of time and find a place of comfort. So these two boys, they're twins, and the one boy is just laying on the root, half in the water. And he was taking the shovel, the purple shovel, and just lifting up water and then watching it go back into the puddle, and lifting it up and watching it go back in. And it was like he was doing some kind of meditation. It was obviously extremely calming for him. And you think again about preschoolers today, there's such high levels of anxiety and diagnosed depression in preschoolers today because their lives, they're so disconnected from nature and their lives are so rushed and stressful. So unfortunately, a lot of kids are being medicated for that instead of getting them outdoors. ADHD is rampant now, and that diagnosis is increasing amongst kids as young as 2 and 3. Basically, to me, ADHD looks like how a preschooler is supposed to be, that they're supposed to be very active and have a hard time sitting still and extremely inquisitive and very impulsive and easily distracted because everything is so new and exciting. That's how preschoolers are supposed to be. And unfortunately, we live in a culture that's forcing them into unnatural activities like sitting still at a desk and writing with pen and paper. And so unfortunately then, that leads to this diagnosis of ADHD, and then we're putting our preschoolers on heavy-duty drugs. I just read recently that 17% of American preschoolers are being medicated now. So it's extremely disturbing. I really think that ADHD is a symptom of not getting enough outdoor time. So the better strategy would be to get children outdoors and having these kinds of experiences. And not just getting them outdoors where it's a short 30 minutes here, 30 minutes there, or some organized sport. It's about getting them outside and communing with nature, having enough time where they can really ground out that energy. And you see, these kids can be very active. They run around a lot, these two boys, and yet there always comes a point in time where they want to just lie close to the earth. The other work we're doing with these kids too is we are developing empathy. I think it's really, really important to get an understanding of empathy and the feeling of empathy in under age 5. And we connect kids with that part of themselves that is empathetic all the time, as far as their feeling compassion for their peers and also recognizing when they're feeling out of sorts. So if we see a child fall down and hurt themselves, and maybe they start crying, maybe they don't, we don't coddle the kids. If they fall and they're not really hurt, we'll just say, "Are you okay, friend?" And we'll ask everybody to check in with them. If somebody's really hurt, then we will stop all activity. I'll say to the kids, "You know what, I can't do anything else until I know that Lily is okay. Can everybody make sure? Can you come over, see what she needs? Does she need a hand? Does she need a hug?" You know, and then they'll come around and they'll say, "Oh, are you okay, friend? Are you okay?" And you don't want to give her a hug. Sometimes they want a hug, sometimes they don't. And since they've been asked to check in, that's great because a lot of times the kids don't want a hug. Some kids, when they get hurt, they don't want anybody to see them. They want to just go running off and be by themselves. And that's okay too. We tell the kids, if you're feeling upset, you don't want to talk about it, then, and you just want to cry or whatever, you can go and sit by that tree or behind that tree and just be alone as long as you want. And then we'll tell the kids, hey, you know, Mickey just wants an alone time now. And I think that's something that today's kids don't really get. A lot of preschoolers parents are trying to get them to talk about their feelings and put labels on their feelings. And you know, a lot of times, even at my age, I don't know what I'm feeling. It's hard to identify, it's just a feeling. And I go out in nature and I know how to have nature help me feel better. These kids are learning that strategy too. So I was going to say about these two boys. Yeah, quite often, the one boy, Mickey, who's the one with the purple shovel, he will feel really upset at the beginning of the day. He doesn't want to leave his mom or whatever, and he says, I just need to be alone for a little bit. And he goes running over to this tree and just sits there, and then he'll just come up and announce, I'm okay now. And it's just really great to see, because that is such an appropriate way to find comfort in nature. And we all know that nature is beneficial to our mental health. I mean, that's why when you're led through a guided meditation, it's all images of nature to help you calm and relax. So on an intellectual level, we all know that, and yet how often do we ourselves go out into nature when we're feeling really upset or stressed out? You know, sometimes we just force ourselves to sit there and get our work done or whatever, keep on the track that is causing us stress or just discomfort, instead of just taking a break and going out into nature, sitting somewhere, lying on the ground, climbing up into a tree, or just taking a walk. We know it's beneficial, and yet we don't really do that so much. And I've run into kids who are teenagers now who say, oh, I hate nature. I hate grass. I hate going barefoot. Well, speaking of barefoot, we have a lot of kids who love to go barefoot, and that's totally fine. In fact, I think I told you, a lot of times when kids show up to the first day of the summer nature camp and I'll be barefoot, they'll say to me, why are you barefoot? And it's just such a funny question. I say, well, because I don't really like wearing shoes, and especially when I'm out in nature. And then they get all excited and they say, can we go barefoot too? Yeah, go barefoot. That's great. But if they didn't see me going barefoot, it never would have occurred to them. So again, sort of leading by example, just being your authentic self and just doing what feels natural. Do these kids love to climb? This is when we are measuring the bracken ferns. I don't know if you have bracken ferns here, but we have these ferns that grow incredibly fast. And so the kids will put measuring sticks next to them each day to the top height of the fern. And then literally the next day, the fern's taller. And so they can watch it grow, and they get really excited about watching that fern grow. The intense focus, I mean, that's the thing too. There have been studies with kids who have ADHD. There's one very famous study out of the University of Illinois that found that when children who've been diagnosed with ADHD spend time outdoors, especially in a green space, that when they go back inside, they are much better able to concentrate and more focused than before they went outside. And that was noticeable to the parents and the researchers as well. Kids can be incredibly focused if they're interested in what's being presented. I remember seeing a little cartoon recently where there was a girl in 2nd grade and she was just staring out the window, and the thought bubble coming up her head said, no, I don't have ADHD, it's just your class is not that interesting. So I thought that was good. I mean, when kids are interested, we see it all the time. Here's a kid holding the millipede so carefully. I mean, the way he's 4 years old and the other kid is 3. And this is the awe and wonder. This is that excitement, and it's so authentic, you know? And now these kids, they've seen millipedes over and over, because again, when the kids come back year after year, there's a millipede season, and we see them everywhere on the ground. And those kids will, when they see them, they start yelling, millipede rescue, and they go and they scoop up the millipede and carefully put it in a place where we're not playing. So again, developing empathy towards all aspects of nature, and sharing that. It's an example of some of the cooperation and teamwork. Because we encourage a lot of peer-to-peer communication, the kids get really adept at describing what they want to do. So often conflicts, what I've found, conflicts among preschoolers are mostly a matter of miscommunication. Like one kid doesn't understand what the other kid is trying to do, and so it comes in and busts up. And one kid's trying to dig a river, the other kid's trying to make a dam. And those are not compatible. And so, you know, it's just a matter of connecting them and speaking directly to each other about what their ideas are and how they can work together. Where can we put the river? Where can we put the dam? And so they were building a very elaborate dam this day so they can make a secondary puddle here. Because our main puddle is down here. And they just had this idea they wanted to dam it up and make a whole other puddle here. So there was a lot of negotiation and discussion about how they would do that. All working together cooperatively. It's another, it's funny, it's the same girl, oops, same girl who was watching the other girl mix the leaves in the bucket. This boy loves making stick houses, and it is so neat because he's started to do that with mushrooms. Whenever he finds a mushroom, he's like so excited about the mushroom and concerned that somebody's going to step on it or knock it over. So he'll make a little stick house right around the mushroom to protect it. So thoughtful. And this is a kid who, when he came to us, this is his 3rd year with us, and he was one of those kids who had typical preschool behaviors that you'd expect to see, grabbing, pushing, those kinds of things. And he was one of the first ones I knew that all our lessons in empathy were working and are giving the kids language for their feelings. When another kid broke his stick house, and he turned to that other kid and instead of hitting him, said, "I feel upset when you break my fairy house." And he was 3 years old. And it was just so sweet too, because it's a little boy. A lot of people don't think of boys as making fairy houses or being concerned about them. But it was really neat because 6 months earlier than that, he would have just hit the other kid. So that's something, again, building empathy for and demonstrating and leading by example. These kids are now teaching the other kids who are coming in that we don't just kick over mushrooms, we protect them. And we build these little houses around them. It's just really sweet. Sorry, that's my 10-minute warning. This, an iconic picture. This is going to be on the cover of David Sobel's new book, Nature Preschools and Forest Kindergartens. This is one of our kids who, she's now 8. This is when she was 2. Just the joy of mud and being splattered with mud. You know, one of the problems that we're running up against in running this model of preschool is that parents today don't want their kids getting dirty. They don't want them getting muddy. They're sending them to school maybe with expensive clothes. This is the problem that public schools are running into when they have teachers who are dedicated to getting the kids outside. Well, then they get backlash from the parents because the kids are soiling their brand new, you know, whatever, Nike sneakers or something. And so it's just really nice to see this. I say we need to have that, a cultural acceptance of muddy children. I mean, that's what children are supposed to look like. And unfortunately, in today's world, kids are given the message that don't get dirty. And, oh, look how dirty you are, and now it's going to be all this work for me, and like that. So we have to work with the parents, too, to be sure that they're giving the children positive messages about that it's okay to get dirty. Because we've had kids show up there the first couple of months and say, I don't want to get, you know, they don't want to get dirty. They're afraid of what their parents are going to say. I said, look, your parents sent you to this school because they want you to get muddy dirty. It's okay. And there's a little bit of anxiety about it because of our cultural norm of how clean children are supposed to stay. So I love this picture because now we do let the kids go barefoot, and this is often what their feet look like at the end of the day. And their parents are thrilled. just, the kids are petting a snail. This was on a celebration day. That's why he's wearing a chicken costume and she's wearing her princess dress. That's me and Robin Rogers, who started the program with me 9 years ago. This is, so the children, as I said, they develop empathy for all the living plants around it because that's one of the things that we taught them and led by example. And this boy, in fact, it's the same one who likes to protect the mushrooms. He came over and he said to me, "I'm really worried about this tree." And I said, "What are you worried about?" He said, "It's got all these holes in the roots. I'm just really worried it's going to die." I said, "Well, what could you do about that?" And he goes, "Well, we could fill them in with mud, but I need some help." And I said, "Well, why don't you ask some of your friends if they want to help you fill in those holes?" Well, sure enough, all the kids were concerned and came running over and started filling in the holes on this root. It's a cedar root, so it's above ground. So then I was able to ask some leading questions to elicit this empathy, and I said, "So where do roots like to be?" And the kid said, "Underground." I said, "Well, so how do you think this root feels that it's above ground?" And the first answer I got was, "Sad." And I thought that was so sweet because it's not anthropomorphic, it's that they understand that all living beings deserve respect and all living beings have the capacity for some kind of emotional state. And I think that's just really beautiful. That's the kind of empathy that we're eliciting with these children. True concern and love for the natural world and desire to protect it. Here's our environmental leaders, right here. This is his dirt museum. All the different colors and textures of dirt that we found in main camp. Children splashing in the mud. One of the things I would say to you about being a leader is, even though you become an expert in your field, you always acknowledge that there's more to learn. I mean, I think that's an important thing about leadership is knowing that you still are on your path. There's not an end. There's not like, oh, now I'm a leader and I know everything there is to know about it. So I say every time I teach, I learn. And I keep myself open to learning, not just from other adults, but from these children as well. Here's the trail that they go down where they're always wanting to be first. This is something I model for the kids. I say, I just like to eat it like a deer without my hands. Some elaborate storytelling. As I said, we'll be with the kids just enough to let them get their social interaction going because it's all about building their social skills at this age. So often American preschool programs are not tending to the social and emotional aspects these days. And so kids are ending up in the public school kindergartens with very poor social skills and very poor emotional resilience. They don't know how to manage their emotions. They don't know how to soothe themselves. And back there. So I just wanted to kind of close with, if I could say what I thought were the most important things about leadership, for sure, one of the first things would be the idea I spoke about, the benevolent leader. The leader who is tending to their flock, as it were. The leader who is nurturing and bringing out the best in the people who are following them. That leadership is not something you can force on people. That to be a true leader, a good leader, is to also reveal your own vulnerabilities and your soft side. It leads to connection. And true leadership is really all about connection. It's about empowering other people and inspiring them to reach inside themselves and draw out the tools that are already there so that they can find their path and follow their own path. So I think the most important thing that you can do to become a leader is follow your passion. I often talk to high school kids and I say, one of the most important messages I hope that I can give you is there's nothing cooler than being yourself. And that's something that took me so long to learn. And unfortunately, we live in a culture where too many people are afraid to be themselves because we have a lot of ridicule and judgment and bullying. So that's a really sad state of affairs. And I think that tapping into your passion, finding what you love, and letting that lead you and guide you, then you will be the leader of whatever that is. There's a great famous saying, and it's by a philosopher called Goethe, which is, that's how it's pronounced, it's spelled Goethe. And I'm just going to give you this short, it's a long, beautiful piece on that whenever you know what you want to do and you commit to that, that the universe provides, that you will be supported in whatever you want to do. I never thought that I would be standing here talking about leadership when all I wanted to do was just have an all-outdoor preschool. And yet that idea has become so interesting and inspiring to other people that I'm now in a position of leadership. With this teacher training program that I started, over 60 teachers now have come to train with me on Bachelor Island from all over the world. I just had 2 women from Australia last month. And it's when Cedarsong really started taking off, the forest kindergarten that I started, there was talk amongst the board of directors, because it's a nonprofit organization, about how we could further this model. We were really onto something. Maybe we should franchise it. And I was the one saying, no, we do not want to franchise this, because I don't want it to be a cookie cutter thing. I don't want to say, this is the way you do this and there's no other way. If you're not doing it this way, it's not the right way. I didn't believe in that model. What I believe in is inspiring and empowering others to reach inside and bring out all that beauty and inspiration that they have and tap into their own passion and develop their own sense of leadership. And as I said, I'm talking about leadership here as being a leader in a certain field, but I'm also talking about how we are leaders to those kids every day by not being bossy with them, but by leading through example and through modeling and reflecting back to them. And also how these children are leaders to each other and how we're developing that tendency and bringing that out in them and how that develops their own sense of self-confidence as well. So the saying I wanted to leave you with is, whatever you can do or dream you can do, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Begin it now. Anybody have any questions? Yeah.
What's the biggest life lesson that the kids have taught you thus far?
Wow, that's a great question. One of the things I think for me is that trusting that they're learning, even when they seem to be just playing. That we live in a culture that, as I said, like we want to prove that the kids are learning, and that just letting go and letting them be is that they're learning. That learning is not as concrete as like knowing your ABCs, knowing numbers, that there's all kinds of learning, the empathy part, learning how to be a good leader, learning how to nurture the younger kids. Those are lessons that they are not getting in a lot of other preschools, and those are ways of learning. So there's the variety of ways that they're learning and the therapeutic aspect of nature. I didn't realize that would come out of this program. Yeah.
You accept 18-year-olds into your kindergarten?
I know, right? I get that question a lot, actually. But I was just teaching at a high school botany class, and I was encouraging those kids to come and be mentors at our school, because since we are a nonprofit, we take interns, we take kids who are needing to get community service credit, that kind of thing, and just this opportunity to be outside and free form in nature is so fun. And you get an opportunity to practice all kinds of leadership skills, working with these younger kids. in a way that's not the bossy leader. But yes, we do. And we also take interns. You know, if your college has or university has an internship program, you can come and intern with us and get school credit for it. Yeah.
How well do the kids who go on to a traditional public school adjust to like the new social structure?
That's a great question. And in my experience now, I've been running this for 9 years, and so a lot of our Forest kindergarten kids have gone into the public school on Vashon, and absolutely have transitioned fantastic. For one thing, they're all doing really well academically because their excitement about learning, their desire to learn, their problem-solving skills, their critical thinking has all been enhanced through our program. The other thing is they are highly emotionally resilient. They know how to soothe themselves. They know how to identify their emotions. They know how to get their needs met without melting down. So that's been reported back to me from the teachers at the public school as a really positive quality. The other thing is their social skills are off the charts, right? Because we've been working with these kids and their social skills from the time they're 2 till 5 or 6. And we do that by, you know, there's always the kids who are kind of hanging around the teacher. Teacher, will you play with me? And we just say, I'm sure some of your other friends want to play. Hey, you know, so-and-so wants to play in this way. Can anybody else want to play that? You know, and really greasing the wheels to those, to really upgrade their social skills. And that has worked great. So yeah, these kids transition fantastically. And truthfully, by the time kids are 7, they're ready to do sit-down work. They're ready to be at a table, and they can sit still for longer periods of time. Of course, in Finland, where the students are outperforming ours across the board, after every 45-minute class, there's a 15-minute recess, and that's through high school. So there's a greater understanding of the need for some downtime between your intense intellectual. Yeah.
What are some more of the ways that you talk to kids to like respect nature?
So that's a great question. One of my strategies is I will compliment a kid before they've even exhibited that behavior. So I see a kid go to reach for a millipede, and I say, oh, I love how gentle you're being. That is so neat. Oh, look how gentle you are. And they slow down. You know, and they're like, okay, am I being, you know, then they become conscious of that. And every time, we do a lot of positive reinforcement, because if you work with preschoolers, you know that they gravitate towards whatever gets them attention. So in large group settings, especially indoors, it's really hard to do anything other than manage the misbehaviors. Don't do that, don't pick up that, hey, stop hitting that kid. When you have a low teacher-student ratio like we do, is 1 to 4, then you're in a unique opportunity to praise the positive behavior as it percolates. So the minute we see a child be gentle with some aspect of nature, we can compliment them on that. Or if I see a kid about to break a branch, I say, oh look, did we check if that's alive? You know. Oh, another thing, when they're picking leaves for making art or creations, we'll encourage them to look underneath the leaf to see if there are any insects. And then anytime we see them do that, we praise that. And I'll see a kid grab a leaf and then look underneath. Oh, thank you so much for checking to see if there were any insects under this leaf. So noticing the behavior and praising it, and also truthfully praising it before you've even noticed it, is a great strategy. Yeah. All right. Cool. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Thanks for coming. Thank you, Leah.